I want to ask you something before we start, and I want you to actually sit with it. Have you, with genuine consistency, no major breaks, no I was traveling passes, no things got busy exemptions, tracked your food, protected your sleep, removed the worst food triggers from your environment, and hit your protein targets for 10 consecutive weeks? Not started, not tried for 3 weeks and then had a stressful month, not kind of tracked most days, 10 consecutive weeks. But if the answer is anything other than a clean yes, then I need you to hold on to that, because it matters a lot where this episode goes. Today, we're talking about why some people struggle so much more than other people with weight loss, the biological stuff, the genetic stuff, the food noise, the appetite dysregulation. All of it is real. We're going to be talking about it honestly. But we're also going to talk about when that truth gets weaponized, where it stops being a legitimate explanation and starts becoming a story that keeps people stuck. And I want to be clear about my tone before going into this. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm not here to tell anyone it's simple, because it isn't. But I am here to be honest with you. And sometimes honest is uncomfortable. So let's get into this. Here's the problem. There are two camps in how people talk about weight loss, and they're both wrong. Camp 1 says it's biology, it's your hormones, it's your genetics, it's the food environment, it's trauma. Stop blaming people. The system is broken, not the person. Camp 2 says, stop making excuses, calories in versus calories out, just eat less, move more. All you need is discipline, and both of those conversations are failing the people that need the most help. Because the truth, the actual research-backed truth, is it's messier than either of those camps want to admit. Biology is real. I'm going to show you in a minute with actual science, not opinion. The appetite disruption after weight loss is documented. The genetic contribution to obesity risk is documented. The way chronic stress and sleep deprivation wreck your hunger hormones is documented. The biology is real, and for most people, it's not the whole story. These two things are both true at the same time, and the whole diet industry keeps pretending you have to pick one. What I want to do today is give you a framework that holds both, a way for thinking about your situation or your client situations that doesn't dismiss the difficulty and doesn't let it become a permanent pass, because those are two different problems and they need two very different solutions. Let me explain the biology because it's important. When you lose weight, even intentional, healthy weight loss, your brain doesn't celebrate, it panics. Your body has a whole set of mechanisms designed to defend against starvation, and a calorie deficit triggers them. Leptin, your satiety hormone, drops. Ghrelin, your hunger hormone, rises. And what that research shows is that those hormone changes don't fully reverse even when the diet ends. So the person who's maintained a 20-pound weight loss, their brain is literally more vigilant about food than it was before it started. They are biologically hungrier at the same body weight. That's not weakness, that's documented physiology. Sleep deprivation is another one. If you're sleeping 5 to 6 hours a night, which a significant chunk of the population does, your body is in a compromised state before you even touch food. One study found that sleep-restricted people consumed over 300 extra calories in a day, primarily from carbohydrate-dense snacks, not because they were weak, because their ghrelin was elevated and their leptin was suppressed from a lack of sleep. Your hormones are working against you before breakfast even starts. Sleep deprivation is not a lifestyle quirk. It's a measurable appetite disruptor. If you're sleeping 5 hours a night and wondering why you're hungry all the time, you have found at least part of your answer. Then there's the food noise. And for people, this is severe. Food noise, what researchers formally call food cue reactivity, is the persistent intrusive preoccupation with food, the constant thinking about what you're going to eat next, the feeling that food is always in the background of your thoughts. This has a neurobiological model rooted in dopamine signaling in reward sensitivity. It's not invented. Some people experience this at a low hum. For others, it's a roar. And for a specific subset of people with binge eating tendencies or clinical level food addiction, it becomes something that fundamentally overwhelms standard willpower-based approaches. In genetics, the heritability of obesity, meaning how much genetic variation accounts for differences in body weight between people, is estimated between 40 and 70%. That is a meaningful number. Over 100 gene variants have been identified that influence BMI and fat distribution. When someone says, I just have bad genes, they might not be completely wrong, but heritability is not destiny. 40 to 70% of the variance between people, it does not mean 40 to 70% of your outcome is fixed. Your genes is the loaded starting conditions. They do not write the ending. So the struggle is real, the biology is real. Here's where we have to get honest. The fact that biology is real doesn't tell us how much of any given person's struggle is biology. And this is where things get complicated and where a lot of people go wrong, because there's a version of biological narrative that gets used as a permanent explanation for situations that haven't even been tested. And I say this with full compassion. Your biological struggle is real, and you may not have done enough with the variables you can control to know how much your difficulty is biology. The biological explanation gets credible when the behavioral hypothesis has been tested. For most people, it hasn't been. Not really. Think about what I've tried everything usually looks like in practice. It looks like multiple attempts, each lasting maybe 2 to 4 weeks, each abandoned when life got stressful or motivation dipped or when results didn't come fast enough. Then a break, then another attempt. The same pattern repeated 5, 10, 15 times over several years. That's not a test of the biology. That's a test of the short-term motivation. And short-term motivation is not a reliable system. It was never supposed to be. Or, I barely eat anything, said with genuine conviction, usually while you're not tracking. The research on this is humbling for all of us. People underestimate the caloric intake significantly, and not because they're lying, because they are genuinely bad at estimating portion sizes. We forget the handfuls of things we were eating over the counter, and we don't count the liquid calories. This is a human cognitive limitation, not a moral failing. But the solution to a cognitive limitation is a data system, not a moral belief that you're already doing it right. The hardest question isn't, is my struggle real? It's, have I actually given the behavioral tools genuine, extended, consistent run? For most people, the honest answer is no, and that matters enormously. So let me give you a framework I find genuinely useful. I call it 3 camps, and I want it to be clear. These are rough categories to help you think, not medical diagnosis. Camp 1, the easy responder. About 30 to 40% of people with overweight or obesity fall here. When given basic structure, a clean caloric target, a food tracking system, reasonable accountability, they respond, not quickly, not without effort, but predictably. Their satiety signaling is relatively intact, their food noise is manageable, they have a lever, and pulling it works. Easy is relative, weight loss is uncomfortable for everyone, but for this group, the difficulty is primarily logistical and motivational. The biological headwire is moderate. Camp 2, the challenge responders, the gray zoners. This is the biggest group, roughly 40 to 50%, and it's one of the most likely to be misunderstood by coaches, doctors, and by people themselves. These people can lose weight. The biology is not catastrophically impaired, but the margin of error is smaller. When life is structured and controlled, they make progress. When it isn't, and it usually isn't, because life is messy, they regress, their food noise is louder than Camp 1. Their satiety signals are a bit blunted, their genetics probably make them moderately harder than average, but here's what the research keeps showing about this group. Their biggest bottleneck is not biology, it's infrastructure, it's systems, it's what they're doing when motivation is low and life is demanding. That's not a genetic problem, that's a problem we can solve. Camp 2 people don't have better results because they're waiting for motivation to show up. They need environments and systems strong enough to operate without it. Camp 3, the dysfunctional responders, about 15 to 25%. This is the group that clinical research and obesity medicine is increasingly recognizing as genuinely underserved by standard lifestyle approaches. We're talking about people with clinical appetite dysregulation that has a measurable biological basis, people with binge eating disorders, which affects roughly 14% of people actively seeking obesity treatment. By the way, so this is not rare. People who are managing significant psychiatric conditions and the medications that treat them, where weight gain of 10 to 15 kilograms is a documented side effect. People carrying severe psychosocial burdens, instabilities, food insecurity, trauma, that functionally prevents adherence regardless of intent. For Camp 3, lifestyle-only coaching is not a discipline problem. It is a mismatched treatment. Telling someone in this group to just be more consistent is the equivalent of handing someone a Band-Aid for a broken leg. You're not wrong that bandages help, you're just solving the wrong problem. The problem is, and this is where things get real, most people in Camp 2 genuinely believe they're in Camp 3. And most people in Camp 3 have been treated like they're in Camp 1. Both of these are failures, both cause harm. Let me talk directly to the gray zone for a minute, because if you've been nodding along, this is probably you. You've tried, you know that. The failure doesn't feel like a choice, and I believe you. But I also want to say this with respect. Believing your struggle is real and accurately identifying what kind of struggle it is are two different things. And conflating them is costing you. Most people in the gray zone have a systems problem that feels like a biology problem. The feeling is real, the diagnosis is wrong, and that difference matters enormously for what you do next. Here's the pattern I see over and over. High food noise, that clusters around specific controllable cues, late night, when you're tired, boredom in the afternoon, social situations with alcohol, stress eating after difficult days. There are real biological drives. They have hormonal and neurological basis, but they're also concentrated in predictable specific environments, which means the environments around those contexts can be changed, which means this is at least partially a system problem, not a biology problem. Here's another pattern. Sleep averaging 5 to 6 hours, stress consistently high, but neither has been promised as a primary variable in the weight loss effort. And yet we're surprised when the hunger hormones are dysregulated. I'm not saying fix your sleep and your weight loss becomes easy. If you haven't structurally addressed the variables that are measurably disrupting your appetite biology, you haven't tested biology yet. You've tested it while undermining it. The diagnostic question I'd put to anyone in the gray zone is, has the protocol actually been run? Real tracking, real sleep prioritization, real food environment reconstructing, not I will try to eat well, but genuinely removing the friction points that cause you to fail in specific predictable situations, real consistency, not enthusiasm followed by a collapse. If yes, for 8 to 12 genuine weeks and nothing happened, then the conversation shifts. We're not talking about clinical support, possible pharmacological options, referrals, and then the biological explanation earns more weight. But if the answer is no, the biological hypothesis hasn't been tested, the behavioral one hasn't been disproven, and there's work left to do that is genuinely within reach. So what does this actually look like? Let me be specific here because general advice is the enemy of real change. System 1, make data your default, not your opt-in. The research on self-monitoring is some of the most consistent in all of behavioral weight loss science. Tracking, even imperfect tracking, explains about 27% of variance in weight loss outcomes in controlled studies. That is a huge number. Every day you track at least 2 meals, the data shows meaningful improvements in outcomes, not because tracking is magical, because you cannot solve a problem you cannot accurately see. Tracking is not a punishment. It's one of the tools that particularly overrides biological noise in people who don't use it, choosing to operate in a system that already has the odds somewhat stacked against them. System 2, restructuring the environment before you need willpower. Willpower is a finite resource, and it depletes under stress, sleep deprivation, and emotional load, which are all the conditions in which most people fail. The solution is not more willpower. The solution is fewer willpower moments. That means your food environment doesn't require discipline to navigate. It requires your default dinner option isn't the most effortful one. It means the snacks that trigger your food noise aren't sitting on the counter. This is not restriction, this is architecture. System 3, treat sleep as a primary metabolic variable, not a self-care, not a nice to have, a metabolic intervention. If your sleep is consistently under 7 hours, you're operating with elevated hunger hormones, reduced satiety hormones every single day. Address that first and see what the hunger landscape looks like. System 4, if you're in Camp 3, escalate to the right support. This one is for coaches listening as much as anyone. Lifestyle coaching is not the right primary treatment for clinical binge eating, for majority psychiatric comorbidity, for severe medicated induced weight gain. The most responsible thing a coach can do for someone in that situation is recognize the mismatch and refer appropriately. That's not giving up, that's professional integrity. Let me close with this. The reason I made this episode is because I think the conversation about weight loss keeps failing people in a specific way. It swings between two poles. It's all your fault and it's none of your fault. And both of those are dishonest in ways that can cause real harm. The truth is harder to hold. It sounds like your struggle is real and your systems are probably insufficient, and those two things are not contradictions. Biology loads the gun, systems pull the trigger. And for most people, the gun has never been loaded right, because the systems they've built were designed to last 2 weeks on high motivation, not 12 weeks through real life. The most important question isn't how hard is my biology, it's have I actually run the protocol that tests it. For most people, the answer is no. And that's not a failure. It's an opportunity, because if the problem is systems, then you can build better ones. If the problem is infrastructure, you can upgrade it. That is the better problem, because the path for a smaller group who have genuinely run the protocol and hit a wall, you're not broken either. You need a different level of support, a different tool, a more complete picture of what actually is happening. That exists. Go find it. And for everyone, give yourself the compassion of accuracy, not the compassion that says, it's not your fault and nothing can help. The compassion that says, this is genuinely hard and there are things that work and you deserve to know what they actually are. Hard and impossible are not the same word. It matters enormously which one you're using, because they lead to completely different actions. That's it. If this landed, share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment telling me what camp you think you're in. I'm genuinely curious. And I'll catch you on the next one. As always, keep showing up.